Few actors can exemplify the artistry of acting and the glamour of superstardom like Jack Nicholson. Considered to be one of the greatest actors of all time, he has earned his place in cinema history over a nearly 60-year-long career. Known as a B-movie actor for many years until his breakout role in Dennis Hopper's Easy Rider, Nicholson earned himself comparisons with Marlon Brando and James Dean in his depiction of male outsiders through his naturalistic method acting. His unique style and baritone voice are as iconic as the characters he has portrayed.
What can I tell you, kid? You're right. When you're right, you're right. You're right.
So, in order to celebrate the legacy of this acting legend, we've ranked what we believe are his 10 best performances. Number 10. Daryl Van Horne, The Witches of Eastwick. It's not every day that one gets to embody the devil himself, but it's a role that Nicholson was seemingly born to play in this George Miller-directed film.
Who are you?
Just your average, horny little devil.
The dark comedic fantasy pairs Nicholson with three of cinema's most iconic actresses. Cher, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Susan Sarandon all play newly single friends in the sleepy town of Eastwick, Rhode Island. The actor's trademark jutting eyebrows and his Cheshire Cat grin are showcased to extremes in his performance as the horny little devil that is Daryl Van Horne. The mysterious Daryl alternates between silly and sinister as he seduces each of the three titular witches and unleashes chaos in the picturesque town of Eastwick. The film is flawed and its conclusion about gender roles and sexual mores is muddled, yet this fun-filled film is elevated by Nicholson, who is at his slimy, sybaritic best.
Anyway, I always like a little pussy after lunch. What do you say?
Number 9. Jimmy Hoffa, Hoffa. As great as Al Pacino was as Jimmy Hoffa in Martin Scorsese's The Irishman, Nicholson's portrayal of the labor union boss in this 1992 biopic is a bit more accurate. He replicates Hoffa's external markers with a fake nose, a bristling haircut, and a Midwestern accent.
Hey, you son of a bitch, you, yeah. You rode with me 85 miles, smoked my cigarettes, listened to my jokes. That's what I did for you. What are you gonna do for me, huh?
But he also conveys the inner tenacity that drove Hoffa to become America's second most powerful man. David Mamet's screenplay flits back and forth through time, illustrating how the tireless Hoffa schemed and cajoled his way from a grassroots organizer to the presidency of the Teamsters Union, and how his schmoozing with organized crime led to his notorious disappearance in 1975. Of all the decade-spanning scenes, the standout is a reenactment of a congressional hearing into Hoffa's union affairs, with Kevin Anderson playing Robert Kennedy. Nicholson dominates the scene, just as the real-life Hoffa did, standing firm and deflecting the committee's accusations with the showmanship of a bull, so much so that everyone looks intimidated.
Nobody cast any aspersions about my loyalty to this country. I object to that.
Number 8. David Staebler, the King of Marvin Gardens. Bob Rafaelson's follow-up to 5 Easy Pieces focuses on two brothers, the neurotic David and the eccentric Jason. David sees himself as a tortured artist, using his position as a late-night radio broadcaster to deliver introspective but factually ambiguous stories about his life.
Heaped on the floor, behind the table, he looked like the remains of some chaotic dinner party.
This role is the temperamental opposite of Nicholson's previous work. It's easier to think that Nicholson would be better off as a huckster who charms and blisters his way through phony schemes, but he's just as adept at playing a more anxious kind of fraudster. His performance of melancholy and introspective subtlety will astonish those who only know him as a grinning old devil. The opening sequence is likely the film's best. In an extreme close-up and against an inky black background, David tells the harrowing and suspenseful story of how he and his brother witnessed their grandfather collapse to his death after repeatedly coughing and choking on a fishbone. Moments later, the film cuts to David commuting to his home, where he sees his grandfather alive and well. Although his grandfather mocks him with fake coughing, Nicholson's David perfectly sets the tone for the film with his response.
The 39 9 stations to choose from, AM and FM, plus television. If you don't like my stories, you don't have to listen to my program.
Number 7. Freddy Gale, the crossing guard. Nicholson played one of his most disturbed characters in Sean Penn's somber and little-seen sophomore feature, The Crossing Guard. Revolving around Nicholson's Freddy Gale, an alcoholic and self-destructive jeweler whose daughter was killed in a hit-and-run incident, he has spent the last 6 years struggling with the trauma and seeks solace in sex and alcohol addiction. With his slicked-back hair and open-neck shirts, you can practically smell the booze and perfume from numerous clip joints whenever he appears on screen. There isn't a false beat in Nicholson's performance as he infuses humanity to his character, making things much more three-dimensional than they initially appear to be. Gale's psychological severity is pushed to its limits when he finds out that John Booth, the drunk driver responsible for his daughter's death, is released from prison.
He's out. John Booth is out. I'm gonna kill him.
Angelica Houston, who was Nicholson's real-life ex-girlfriend, also stars as Gale's ex-wife, Mary. The scene where the two characters sit in a diner and discuss the breakdown of their relationship is an enthralling one where reality seeps through into fiction.
And the marriages people have. We had a good one, didn't we?
Yes.
Number 6. Jake Gittes, Chinatown. Hailed as one of cinema's greatest mysteries, both by critics and audiences alike, the screenplay for this neo-noir is lauded as one of the best ever produced. Roman Polanski's film may be set in 1937, but Jack Nicholson's performance as Jake Gittes feels like an updating of the detective archetype for the 1970s. The film shifts from investigators who lived by codes of honor to one who has a breezier charm and smutty interest in adultery cases. Nicholson's Jake is smart, but gets regularly tricked or physically weakened by others, and has a bandage over his nose to underline his vulnerability.
I goddamn near lost my nose, and I like it. I like breathing through it.
Showcasing the silkier, jazzier, and more understated shadings of his acting range, Nicholson appears in every scene of this luscious mystery. He portrays a private investigator for the post-Watergate age, a knight who is unable to slay the dragons of political and moral corruption that ensnares and poisons everything in their reach. It was a performance that solidified Nicholson's star status, earning him his 4th Oscar nomination.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
Number 5. George Hanson, Easy Rider. Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda may be great to watch, but it's half an hour into Easy Rider when their show is stolen by Nicholson, who plays the film's most wonderfully realized character, George Hanson. From the details sprinkled here and there, you can infer a backstory. He's a genteel but wayward Texan who's a bit of a dweeb. He was born into wealth but is a hippie at heart, and while he isn't close to his conservative family, he still uses his political connections to keep himself out of trouble.
Oh, yeah, they gonna talk to you and talk to you and talk to you about individual freedom. But they see a free individual, it's gonna scare them.
From the way he flicks a bit of hair off the tip of his tongue to the rubbing of his finger down his face and neck, it's a role rich with beautiful gestures that straddle the line between naturalistic and the balletically purposeful. It's comparable to Marlon Brando at his most expressive. Despite barely having any screen time, Nicholson's performance was enough to nab him an Oscar nomination and catapult himself to stardom.
To old D.H. Lawrence.
Number 4. Bobby Dupea, 5 Easy Pieces. One may think Bobby Dupea is an early Nicholsonian antihero, a blue-collar rebel to cheer on as he challenges stifling authority figures. He's the scion of a family of musicians, and when he visits their secluded home to see his dying father, we find Dupea is just as uncomfortable in rooms furnished with leather-bound books and grand pianos as he is in the bowling alleys and greasy spoon diners of Bakersfield.
You see this sign?
There's nothing about his relatives, girlfriend, or co-workers at an oil rig which deserve his disdain, but his sourness masks his feeling of self-dissatisfaction.
You shit-big fuck-cock son of a... assholes!
He's less like an angry young man and more like the Beatles' Nowhere Man. His decision to leave his bourgeois family to choose a life of drifting from one low-paid job to another indicates his perennial uncertainty about his wants and needs. Nicholson is less frequently explosive here, as Dupea prefers to flee from his problems rather than confront them. He attempts a mute expression when he listens to other people's inane blather, but it's always clear he's digging his heels into the carpet. The scene he shares with his father towards the end of the film highlights the emotional vulnerability and fragility Nicholson is able to bring to the character who hides so much within.
I move around a lot. Not because I'm looking for anything really, but because I'm getting away from things that get bad if I stay.
Number 3. Warren Schmidt about Schmidt. This film from director Alexander Payne is like an inverse 5 Easy Pieces. Unlike the restless Bobby Dupea, the 66-year-old Warren Schmidt has successfully held down one job, one marriage, and one comfortable middle-class existence in which nothing exciting has ever occurred.
What difference has my life made to anyone? None that I can think of. None at all.
Nicholson plays Schmidt with a surprising frailness and a wilting frown. He often enters a room looking momentarily confused, as if he's forgotten why he's there. After Schmidt retires and his wife suddenly dies, he undertakes a long road trip to attend his estranged daughter's wedding and to recover meaning in his life. As in all road trip movies, it's not about the destination, but what Schmidt encounters on the way that ends up revealing more about his character. There are many scenes where Schmidt steps out of line, but he never loses our sympathy, as it's clear his coarseness always stems from his fear of loneliness and his loss of control. For his efforts, Nicholson earned his 13th and final Oscar nomination.
What did you really think of me? Deep in your heart. Was I really the man you wanted to be with? Was I?
Number 2. Randle McMurphy, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. There is plenty to dislike about Randle McMurphy. He's snarky, volatile, has committed statutory rape, and he's feigning madness so he can serve time in a psychiatric hospital instead of jail.
They think you've been faking it in order to get out of your work detail. What do you think about that?
Do I look like that kind of guy to you, Doc?
But the greatness of Jack Nicholson's signature role is in how he instills warmth and even pathos in such a character and makes us believe McMurphy is a natural leader. He's a man who can befriend mental patients and security staff alike, a person with indomitable willpower, and it feels as if he is truly trapped, both physically and mentally. Nicholson's vivacity is a huge part of why Milos Forman's adaptation of Ken Kesey's novel soars.
How about it, you creeps, you lunatics, mental defectives? Let's hear it for Bull Goose Randle back in action. Nice shirt, Chesaroo.
Even when the book's psychedelic trappings are eschewed, even when the hospital's lonely souls are filmed through a dreary, low-lit documentary texture, it remains a rousing and reinvigorating work of cinema.
Get out of my way, son. You're using my oxygen, you know what I mean?
Number 1. Jack Torrance, The Shining. One of Nicholson's most divisive performances was in this equally divisive film. In Nicholson's characterization of Jack Torrance, he's selfishly focused on his work and is disturbingly ill-tempered. When his wife Wendy interrupts him from his writing, Jack snaps at her and tries to use his wolfish grin as if to soften his anger. But it's clear from his instant fury and Wendy's subservient response that there is a history of relational abuse which is not exactly in the distant past.
Here's Johnny.
It's this emphasis on the psychological rather than the supernatural that makes his succumbing to cabin fever and the Overlook Hotel's ghostly influence so potent. Nicholson's love it or loathe it style reaches its apex in The Shining's final act when Jack has regressed entirely. From his curled lip and loud grunting to the way he limps through the hotel corridors with an arched, humped back, this is Nicholson at his most animalistic. And it feels not only like the most logical endpoint to his character, but a purposeful darkening of his star image.
I said, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains in.
So, those were our picks for Jack Nicholson's top 10 best film performances. From playing angry young rebels to authority figures and gentle heroes, Nicholson's choice of roles has certainly been versatile, but iconic all the same. So what do you think of our picks? Comment down below to tell us which of your favorite Jack Nicholson performances we've left out.